Yeah. All right. So welcome. I hope you're having a good workshop. And this session, yeah, we did it last year. I do it actually fairly frequently because it's such an important thing because we all worry about having these conversations, especially when you're anticipating conflict or maybe it's a colleague or a family member or someone who's kind of a challenge to deal with. And we always want better ways to have these conversations. And that's what we're all about here, is to give you some better ways and to give you some practice time in a safe environment. So we're going to lay some groundwork for about a half hour, and there's a couple of interactive segments so that you can practice different parts of this and do a little bit of reflecting on where your persuasive segment is. And then we're going to dedicate a lot of time to a role-playing activity. You'll get groups of 3, you have a half hour, and every person gets to play a different role in that. And you can test out some of these communication strategies, and then we'll come back into the main group and kind of see how we did and go through some questions. So a little bit about where the heck I'm coming from here. So I'm a geologist. I'm a writer for Yale Climate Connections, and I'm a writer also for NASA's climate change website. For Yale, I've had the sort of luxury to explore how people make up their minds, how they change their minds, how they talk about climate change. Yale, in a separate but related project, also tracks a ton of public opinion data about how people think about climate change and climate change policy and how that varies with geography and all kinds of things. So a few things I've gotten to do. One is do some deep dive interviews with people that actually have changed their mind. And it's really interesting to hear about what sort of what led up to that. And it's a long process and it's a slow process, and we all wish it would happen faster. But it's really interesting to get insights from people who have gone through these big changes. I've also done this project with these paired interviews, taking people with different outlooks on climate change and then pairing them together and sort of using this, and I'll show some slides on this in a minute, but this 6 Americas spectrum, taking people from different places and pairing them together in conversations, again, to observe what works, what resonates, what's persuasive, what's not. And then on top of that, I do a lot of voter outreach. I take the sort of journalistic lessons I've learned and I take them to doorsteps and on the phone and really get into these conversations. And from that, that's led to a lot of different writing, but here's one from Scientific American about some of the nutshell lessons about what it's like to have these conversations. Pretty intimidating, but boy, it's an amazing place to practice. And you get lots of tries, one for each door. So that's a little bit what informs this, where I'm coming from. But one of the things that we worry about when we talk about climate change or anything, whether it's reproductive freedom or just, gosh, everything is like flashpoint topic these days, right? We all know how this feels living in this really polarized environment. We always imagine the worst. We always imagine the person we're going to be talking to is going to be this sort of, extremist denier or something like that. And that's kind of what we imagine. And when we imagine that, you get kind of stressed out. You might get kind of snarky or mad or whatever. And it's like you're kind of imagining the worst. But that's why this is a very important piece of research. So I put a link to this research in the Padlet. But basically, and maybe you've seen this already, this is really commonly used because it's so darn useful. How do we feel? How do Americans feel about climate change? Along many issues, it's not so black and white in terms of like yay or nay. There's a spectrum. The spectrum here is not symmetrical. We are not divided into sort of believers and deniers. I don't like really either of those terms, but that's not how we're stacked up. Let's go to the far dismissive end. So dismissive is like your denier, someone who just dismisses the science altogether. And note that that's a very small number, 9%. And it's true on most issues, the extreme is extreme, it's small. They're out on the fringes. And so when we kind of play that in our head, what might happen if I talk to someone, if you're thinking it's like a real denier, well, there's only a 9% chance that that's who you're going to be talking to. Maybe if you lump in the doubtful, well, then there's some wiggle room, right? And so there's a 10% chance of that, but that could be an interesting conversation. Or the disengaged, it's a really small number, but they don't know anything. And then look at all the allies we have on the left side. So chances are you're going to be, you're sitting next to someone on the airplane, or you get a new colleague, or like me, you go on a camping trip with people you never met. Chances are they're going to be, over on the left side, just statistically. So that, I hope, helps you sort of not be so worried about engaging in climate conversations. The next thing is that how do these change over time? So this is that same data set, but plotted as a time series over the last 5 years, 2017, 2021. Again, starting with the dismissive. So it's changed by the tiniest bit. 5 years ago, 11% of Americans were dismissive, and now only 9%. Okay, that hasn't changed much. So what does that tell you about the likelihood of you changing someone's mind that's in that category? Pretty small, right? Those people are pretty resolute. And you could spend a lot of energy and a lot of frustration and a lot of grinding your teeth and losing a lot of sleep over probably not a lot of benefit in terms of changing someone's mind. I totally get that it's hard to resist trying, and I also try, but I don't think this is where we should be like teaching whole workshops and practicing whole things and writing lots of articles and putting a lot of our energy, because it's not producing hardly any results. By contrast, look at the top of the graph. The alarmed category has doubled in 5 years. Okay, that's good work. That's happened through all kinds of reasons, but that's the result that we want to focus on. And where do those people come from? Most of them came from the 2 categories below, which have gotten smaller. So again, we're in the sort of friendly territory, and we're bumping people up from sort of not sure what they think or they're concerned, but it's like, I don't know, into the alarmed. And what alarmed means in this category is you're taking action, you're doing something. So that's our work. So most of the people are in this middle. We want to talk to those people in the middle and bump them along the alarm scale, which means not so much fighting with deniers. Nevertheless, we all have our own family, our own community, our own voters, our own coworkers. And so I just want to pause here and give you a second to just jot down for yourself and also in the chat, who can you think of, who are you trying to persuade? Why are you here? Is there someone specific? You don't have to be personal at all, but like, where's the work that you're interested in doing on this spectrum? So just take a minute to reflect and then a minute to write in the chat of who you're looking at. And then as soon as you have sort of your head around someone that you might be persuading, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry to start at the bottom, but politicians for sure, they hold the power regardless of what the public thinks. Going back up to Devon, middle school students and their community, parents, guardians, community members, for sure. Yep, students are kind of a whole different issue. My sibling, I get it. The family stuff can be very tricky. Family members, again, to combat climate change. That hopefully implies that they appreciate that it's a real issue, but are needing to take steps. Yeah. So Carolyn, basically, we need to step it up. We get it, but not understanding the urgency. And that's just the data that you saw on the Yale data, is that people are sort of like concerned or a little bit passive and bumping up into that alarmed. Yes, moving students to actions for sure. And action, it's curative. It feels great and it begets more action. So those are very good goals. Good. So we're not in the like super fighting mode, which is a great place to start. Oh, those in my realm. Now, what I wonder, you can elaborate more on what you mean in your realm, or where your realm is. Before I get into anything specific, not everyone is worth listening to. When we put ourselves out there to try to meet people part way in a controversial topic, that never means that you put yourself in any kind of destructive place. So it's usually pretty easy to recognize. Remember that dismissive crowd, doesn't move at all. And regardless of what category of opinion people are in, they could be an abusive person. And so just be careful to very early on in the process, differentiate sort of a productive conversation versus one that's actually turned itself on you personally. And those are conversations that are not worth continuing. Yes, just what Devin was just saying. So when someone starts yelling and arguing and is not willing to be rational, you leave that person alone. That is not worth your energy. All of you who are here, who are like doing this for your career and taking these workshops to get better at it, You have a lot of skills and passion and experience to contribute to the conversation. Please do not waste it on experiences like that. That's bad for you, for your mental health. And I would rather you use your energy to someone who's going to be constructive. It's really hard when you get dragged into this, but this is a very good rule to learn. Think about that graph. The bottom of the graph is not moving. It's not worth your time. Yeah, so be careful. Okay, setting that aside, that category aside, we've got everybody else, the other 90%. How do we be persuasive? This is note here, nothing in this talk is going to be about being right or citing, NASA science or having the perfect talking point. That is not persuasive. People ask me that all the time. Hey, what's the one thing I can say? Or what are the key things? And it's like, I have bad news. That won't work. So here's how it does work. It's a slow process. It starts by listening and figuring out who is that other person and getting them to realize that you're there to help them have a good experience. In the process of doing that, you're going to understand who they are and how they work. Then, based on those first two things, you can find common ground. It's always there. And if you take steps 1 and 2, step 3 will happen. You'll recognize it, and we'll get some practice at this too. Then you want to kind of get away from that normal talking point, headbutting. Well, I heard this, I heard that. And it just takes a little nudging. And then you can get the conversation to a very fertile ground and start reframing. They have their talking point and you're just going to sidestep rather than rebut. We'll practice that too. Then the last thing is, if all these steps work, which they don't always, but if they do, then you can make one more little Tai Chi move and get both of you on the same side of the issue. So you're no longer opponents, you're now allies. And I call that a superpower because it's rare, but it totally works and it's amazingly powerful. So that's our outline. We're going to go through this some more. Okay, so the first rule of persuasion is that you need to set the ground, set the stage. When I first started knocking on doors for political campaigns, they give you this script and you're like, hi, my name is, fill in your name. I'm here for the John Tester campaign. And I'm like, oof, you're immediately giving away the side you're on and won't you support me? And it's too much up front. I haven't learned about them. They haven't learned about me. There's a lot of front loading there. So they're not going to hear anything you say until as humans, we figure each other out a little bit. So it's a slow process, but you have to build the foundation. And we all want to jump in with our science and our knowledge, but you have to cool your jets and start way at the bottom. So first, you want that person to have a good experience. Just have a pleasant interaction. And if that's as far as it goes, you did no harm. That's important. If you're having a good experience, they're having a good experience, you're going to ask questions and try to figure them out a little bit. Who is this person? How do they tick? What are they about? And that's extremely important because one, you're going to show that they're valued. They're going to kind of reveal themselves. They're going to say, well, I'm a veteran, or I'm a hunter, or I'm a student. You're going to say, wow, that's amazing. Thank you for contributing, in these ways. And they're going to be like, oh, that was kind of nice. And then you're going to loop back. You're creating good experience by valuing who they are. You're also learning about them. So you're gathering your information you're going to use later. As you have this conversation, undoubtedly there's things you have in common. You live in the same place, you work at the same school, you have similar hobbies, you're both parents, you're both bicyclists, whatever it is, you're going to find those things. And those are excellent things you can start to build your conversation around. And only once all of those are done, then you can figure out what message to bring. So if at any point in here I started throwing NASA data at it, I don't know, it probably wouldn't land because they think I'm being a jerk, or I don't know what's important to them, or they don't feel valued. So I need to do all these things before we know what we're really going to talk about. So it's slow, but it's also not so scary because you're actually just stepping in, you're tiptoeing really. So here's a couple things about that are really important. Most people really like to talk, and they really like to talk about themselves. And probably you're nodding because we've recognized that about people. And so if you give the floor to the other person and they talk and they feel valued, their brain is actually going to give them some dopamine, and they're actually going to have this happy experience. And so let them create that good experience, give them the floor, make them feel good about it. And they are actually going to start to trust you and enjoy the experience. And it's pretty magical. Again, looping back, this is when you can also sense, is this person even worth talking to? As Devin was saying, if they're going to be, obnoxious, then you can just end it right there without you having exposed yourself at all. So that's pretty safe. Also, as they're talking, you show that approval, some solidarity. Hey, we're actually both kind of similar. And so, because a lot of the way today's politics works is this divisive thing, this wedge stuff. So it's like all those environmentalists, well, they're just terrorists, they're just going to make you feel guilty. They're just blah, blah, blah. And then when they actually get to know you, you're not like that, are you? And they're going to be like, huh, well, I wasn't necessarily convinced, but I did meet an environmentalist who was actually a completely cool person. And if you get that far, that's great. That's a win. You did no damage, and you kind of broke the stereotype a little bit. So definitely worth it. Show that solidarity. Look for it. The powerful thing is the more they do that, the more you're learning. And it feels like a little manipulative because you're asking people to talk and you're approving of them and you're setting up this great situation, but you're doing that not just because you're an amazing person, but you're doing it strategically because now you're learning how you can recognize their priorities and how you can use that with your messaging. There's a lot of power in this. And if this is as far as you get, that's great. You learned something. You got some insights. You did no damage. You broke a stereotype. That's great. Progress is very slow. So that's good with your family or whatever. You could get this far. Okay, a really important thing. You've probably heard this in lots of communication things, but you can't make someone care about what you care about. It's not at all persuasive to say that I am a skier. I like winter, therefore everybody needs to work on climate change because winter's important. Who cares what I like? What do you like? Oh, you're a gardener. What do you grow? Oh, lettuce. Yeah, I love growing lettuce. It's struggling right now. My lettuce does not like it when it's hot, right? So now we're like getting into what makes them tick. So you really got to stop worrying about what is important to you and only focus on what's important to them, because climate change and energy affect everything, right? It's hard to think of any aspect of our lives that that doesn't fall into this. And so you're just looking for that connection point. Okay, so you're going to frame your point around them. And that's why you've asked who they are and gotten into their lives a little bit. And then you're going to be much happier, much easier to find those pathways. Okay, so how do you learn their priorities? You probably have figured out this answer because you've been listening and asking, and you've been like leading into this. So now you know a little bit about them. And as you go through these steps, you start to feel a little more ready to really start making your points. However, it's like, okay, sure, I'm going to listen to you to figure out what you're about, and then I'm going to tell you all the things you do wrong. Okay, no. This picture, it's not just any old picture of elk. It's I live near Yellowstone, and in the fall, the young elk practice fighting. And they practice fighting to get better at fighting. And doesn't that sound like social media and a lot of things in our lives these days? So if you start to feel the headbutting, you're both getting more dead set in your ways. And so you have to relax that. So be on the lookout for like, oh, I'm only listening to see where you're wrong. Not that. I'm listening to find where we agree. This is a little brain shift. So we're going to practice this. So to listen for where we agree. So read the slide. I'm going to give you a minute. This is a legit, just cut and paste. I get all kinds of interesting email after writing articles. So read this and then just post in the chat your reaction/response and take a minute to read it and then type. Okay, so when you have a reaction, you can put it in the chat. Okay, thanks, Lynn, for getting us started. Nice. Nice, agreeing with everybody. Yucky, it's a turnoff, it's ignorance. There's a lot of people around. Yes, what's the EPA doing? This is and also going back up to Lynn's, this is like, this is familiar that you hear stuff like this amongst your students. Carolyn, I'm with you. I don't even know where to start. There's so much in there. And that's sort of why stuff like this is useful. CO2 is not 3%. Can you imagine? Yeah. So, and this is great. Your reactions are exactly, it's totally useful because there's so many places you could go. Like as a like, yes, spelling is it sort of fits, right? Like the spelling and all of it goes together. And you could kind of take the like, you look, you can't even spell, floating. Why am I want to talk to you? There's lots of places you could go with this. A to-be rant. That is almost every time someone suggests some amount of alcohol going on here. Yeah. Okay. So, right. Whew, it's a junk show. Reread it this time. And some of you have started this nudging on this a little bit. Reread it and find one or two places where you actually already agree with this person. So you have to read it with a different brain. Take that like critical brain and set that aside and bring on this sort of empathy brain. And where could you be like, yes, I agree. Well, so fill in those places. Yep, ice melts. Nice, keep going. What else is in there that you could just begin a little bit of we both agree on this. Temperatures have changed. The EPA has helped us be less polluted. Polar bears are in trouble. EPA has been useful. Yeah, Supreme Court, we'll see, right? Yes, the polar bear. Oh, I like this one from Megan. So polar bears floating on ice is used to pull on the emotional heartstrings. Ooh, we're really on the same side as that. Yeah, maybe that's overused. Maybe that's not so relevant. Yes, the planet has been stable over the last 100 years. Actually, it was more stable before that, maybe. But yes, sure. But yes, it's been stable in the past. Right. Exactly. Reinmar. Yes, you can say it has been stable in the past. You don't need to get into the 100 years, right? You could just agree that it has been stable and it was some time ago. But not like ancient ago. Yeah, right. Good. Yep. No, it's good. And so that's a great point. And so that little do-si-do shows that you can find the points that you agree on and you can throw away the rest. It really doesn't matter. And our brains as science people and as educators and people who are really into this issue, we're so tuned to find the little detail that it's not 3%, that it's not this, that it's not that. And it's really hard for us to set that aside and go like, no, forget all that. That's an interesting like drunk text. But hey, let's talk about the EPA. Let's talk about India and China. Let's talk about so-called experts. Where are some things that we can actually get along? But the most important thing in this isn't sort of exactly what answer you come up with, but the way you felt your brain shift from like, ooh, that's such a crock of nonsense to like, yeah, okay, what we agree on. So that's the exercise here. So nice work. Okay. So how do you do that? That was just one drunk text example, but what are some places where you can pretty reliably find agreement in this realm? So when people talk about critical thinking and indoctrination are words that are used by the other side to sort of blame the opposite side regardless. But at least it's something we could rally on. Like, isn't it important for our students to think critically? Everyone's going to agree, even though you're thinking about it in opposite ways. Same goes with media literacy and the harm of misinformation. Like those are topics you can at least in words agree on, but you're thinking about it in the opposite direction. But again, we can agree on that. So yeah, we want our students to understand data. Agree. Everyone agrees. Great. We want our students to have media literacy to understand where their information should come from. Yes, we're going to all agree. Great. Misinformation, we need to learn how to navigate around that. Great. And so, even though they're thinking media literacy means watch Fox News and you're thinking it means never watch Fox News, you're still agreeing in concept and you're getting into a better jive by just having those agreements, and you can tiptoe out from there. The next set are more about topics, cultural things. So energy jobs is an amazing one in Montana and in lots of places that we can not even talk about climate change. We could just talk about energy jobs. Easy, very easy to agree. Do we want relevance? The energy industry changing. Do we want to change with it? Yes, we agree. Are we ready for challenges? Can we do big things in our community? Is our school district ready for big things? Is our state, is our public service commission, is our country, are we ready to rally as a team? You know, that's been hard for the country, but in some smaller subset, I think that works really well. You know, voters in our district, employees in our school, whatever it is, we're in this together as a team challenge. Yes, what's our position on energy? You know, do we want to lead or follow? I use that one a lot because Montana's doing so bad. I'll get to that, how I use those, you know, I'll put together my argument towards the end here. And health, public health for sure. Healthy economy, healthy people. And yes, energy jobs is open to interpretation, but that's when you can start nuancing your framing. You can start by saying, oh man, energy jobs are so important for Montana. I'm totally with you. And like, I'm glad you brought that up. We really feel the same way on that. You know, I've been thinking about that, and then you can start to pivot. But at least, you know, dwell on these. It's like when you're tiptoeing across a stream and you get to like a big flat rock and you're like, whew, you can kind of shift your feet, get ready, like dwell on those places when you're agreeing before you take those next steps. Okay, so now just what sort of what Reinmar was hinting at. Now you've got those places of agreement. You have to watch out for the disagreement, and you don't want to just start butting heads, but you want to think about reframing. So I'm not going to refute you. I'm not going to call in the experts. I'm not going to correct your spelling, but I'm going to wonder if we can kind of take this agreement and work it towards something where we reframe it where it's palatable to everybody. And you're going to practice this. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples, and then I'm going to throw these out to you and you can practice. So clean energy. Yeah, sure. It sounds great, but it's too expensive. What I could do is I could say, no, I've looked at the Lazard data, and actually solar is much cheaper than coal. It's like half the price of coal. I could do that, but now I'm butting heads. Or I could say, I agree. The cost of energy is really important. Okay, so I'm not just rebutting, I'm building agreement, dwelling on agreement. Scientists, they just manipulate data that doesn't lead them to the right conclusions. Personally, that totally triggers me. Sounds like we both agree that the idea of a robust scientific process will advance the best ideas. Okay, and they're going to agree, you're going to agree, it's all good, we're not fighting. If we don't drill for oil in the US, then we're going to have to import it from Saudi Arabia. Again, I could show you all the data that shows that we don't actually really do that, but I won't. I'm going to say you're so right. Americans should be innovators in energy, so we don't have to rely on other nations. I love that. Like, yes, why don't we do it ourselves? So you can see how any of these statements now could lead to me starting to frame a message, but I'm not going to rebut. I'm going to agree. Take some practice. That's why we're going to practice this one. So the technique is you're going to find at least one thing you can agree on, and you're going to say it out loud. Bonus, if you can share that in a way that kind of flatters the other person and helps them feel like they are respected and heard. We're not going to push back where it's wrong. We're going to like figure out where we're sharing the goal, or where our goal is shared between us rather. And then we're going to maybe even lead them with some questions so we can kind of continue to build that common ground. So examples, yeah, I agree, elected officials, they should work for us. I like how you said rural voices get drowned out. I feel the same way. Yeah, totally hear you. Misinformation. Yeah, it's a huge problem. What can we do on that? So we're kind of now we're like not in the like talking points, we're more in the like general areas of agreement, and we're almost commiserating. Okay, so practice this. I think the chat, you can raise your hand and do it out loud, but the chat is actually flowing right along really nice. So we might just leave it at that. But so in gray on the side here, it's just the same bullet points. And so here is one for you to practice. So your person says, with gas prices so high, I don't want to pay even more for so-called green energy. And so craft a statement that begins with, I agree that, and put it in the chat. Yeah, yes. First of all, we agree that on reality, gas prices are high. Energy costs are important. Excellent. Maybe one or two more. We have 3 of these, so you don't have to chime in on every one. We're just going to getting this pattern warmed up. But that's the basics of it. You just agree that this is an important issue. Yes, I would also make, yes, perfect, right? So we just agree that the problem is what it is. Perfect, great, excellent. Okay, let's try the next one. It's hot now, right? Yes and yes. Excellent, Reinmar and Sherlin. Okay, so let's pivot to the weather. Heat wave in lots of places right now. And you can say, whew, I do this, like I'm a gardener. So I go to the garden center, I often kind of slide on into some climate conversations. And you can say, man, it's hot. And people would say, oh, there was a heat wave way back when and it was hotter. So yeah, I agree. There have been heat waves. Yes, excellent. What else on this one? Oh, interesting. So that, so, and I do this sometimes too. That's not actually what the person is saying, but you agree with it anyway. That actually is, that's like ninja level stuff, and actually sometimes totally works. You're agreeing with something that they didn't say, but you give them credit for it and they go with it. Yes, I'm just scaling back here. Yeah, no, it could be, Charlene, that's how you see it. It's totally good. Yeah, fawn, Presbyterian. Yes, heat waves are so challenging. I like this a lot. That must have really hurt a lot of people. That's excellent. So you're really like, who cares when it was? Heat waves are awful. They're bad for people. They kill people. That must have been bad. And that, boy, that really takes the like elk butting heads out of it. You're just in this very easy empathy place. Yeah, we can talk about Dust Bowl, agriculture methods. Yes, thank goodness we can track our data better today. Right, and so this is actually a person using data. And I can say, yeah, it's cool that we keep track of data. I use that idea a lot when people say the climate has changed before, or this and that. I say, well, like how, yeah, it's cool that we track this stuff. How can we tell the difference from signal and noise and all that? I use friendlier words, but yeah, you can get in on the data angle. Yes, separating weather and climate, like excellent attitude, personality. Great, good examples. Okay, ready for one more? Try to make these very different in kind. Okay, so it doesn't matter what we do. We got China, we got Joe Manchin, we got Russia, whatever. Put in your obstacle du jour. Those things are going to make it worse no matter what we do. It does not matter. Who cares? Where do we agree? I agree that a little levity, always good. Yes. Oh, Carolyn, that's great. I agree. There's obstacles and it's so hard. Yeah, we're all just, we can commiserate. I agree. Everyone is going to have to contribute. I like that too, because it kind of brings us all along together. Oh, these are really good. You guys are like expert level. Yeah, nice. We're just trying our best with what we have. We'll always have those who are trying to make it worse, but we want to work for something even better. We're not just going to cave to the obstacles. These are great. Russia has been an imperial myth. that might evoke some back and forth. Yeah, I'd rather make it better than continue to make it worse. Excellent, right? So, or you could be like, yeah, or you could even switch the topic away from climate change. Talk about like, well, when was the challenging time in your life where there are people not on your side? And did you just be like, oh gosh, darn it, I guess I won't graduate after all because someone, wasn't on my side. Great. You guys are really, you've obviously had lots of practice. Great. So the key is just beginning with the I agree that rather than the, yeah, but you're wrong. I agree these politicians are trying to keep up with times. Yeah, I agree that politicians, are just not always on our side. I agree that politicians are sometimes not really working for us. I agree that politicians are funded by industry. But great, this is good. So you're already, but what's important here is you're doing that little Tai Chi. You're sidestepping the talking point rather than just engaging in an argument. Okay, great. Now we're at the third and really the coolest place, which is now you're gonna put you both on the same side. So I put the superhero back on this because this is the powerful part. So we agree that blah, 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 our shared goal. So I wonder, now I'm going to put us both on the same side. I don't know the answer, Because when I feel like I do know the answer and I condescend on someone with the answer, that's not persuasive at all. That's obnoxious. So I'm going to make some open-ended questions, but they're informed, strategic, open-ended questions. Maybe we could work this out together. We two Montanans, we two teachers, we two people that live in Park County, whatever it is, we two gardeners. I wonder how we can work toward the solutions. I wonder how we could solve this problem together. And so we have our elk fighting, and we're going to change that. And it's going to be people rowing a boat together. Because fighting is not going to bring Montana any closer to a better energy economy. Fighting isn't going to make, me and you arguing isn't going to change Joe Manchin's mind. It's not going to change the temperature either. So we need to work together. But now I'm inviting you in. I know a little bit about you. We agree on things. I'm inviting you in to become my ally. Takes a bit of practice, especially if you're feeling threatened. And in my experience, maybe 1 in 8 conversations get to this point. Hopefully along the way, I've done no harm, right? Okay, so now I'm going to just share, now I can be persuasive. I'm going to run through some of these exercises. I want to go for just a few more minutes before we do our role playing. So now we can start to share our ideas, but we've set all this careful framing. So I'm going to give you Montana's examples. And this comes from a lot of listening to voters, a lot of researching our energy situation, trying to get interesting data, harassing our senators, one in particular on on Twitter, because I'm trying to figure out where are the resonant arguments. And this, everyone will have to, use your own situation, your own community. So Montana, we have got to move beyond coal. How are we going to get there? That's sort of a big issue. I think we both, we all want Montana to be on the winning side of this. We are together. We are not like, should the coal plant close? Yes or no? It's actually going to close regardless of what we think. Because in this case, the coal plant is partly owned by other states, by Washington and Oregon. In fact, sometimes I can even be like, those people in Oregon, what do they know? They wrote a law that's going to make our shared coal plant close. And so like Oregon, well, maybe they're the problem, but Montana, we got to figure out what we're going to do next. So by doing that, I kind of made Oregon a little bit the scapegoat, and that helps, even though of course I want that coal plant to close. I can't wait, but it kind of puts that on somebody else. I'm not, I'm talking to a Montana voter, so we can kind of scapegoat Oregon if we need to. So what do we need? What, our enemy our situation is this coal plant is closing, but what do we in the rowboat need? We need a modern energy economy. Do we want to stay relevant in energy jobs or an energy sort of just in the energy scene? Yes. Do we want the jobs? Obviously. Do we want the money? Yes, of course. Okay. The coal plant's closing. We're not fighting against that. That is what it is. What do we do to build this modern energy economy? And here you can weave in because you're a veteran or you're a union guy or whatever it is, you start weaving in your priorities. Okay, so how do I make this message stick? That's the sort of thing that's important. You can use some storytelling. My mind has been changed on this. I've been like a kind of straight up data person. I realize now after practicing with people, storytelling totally works. You can make a little narrative out of it. Don't make it too much about you, but it definitely is sticky. Show a little vulnerability. I don't know everything. I'm a little nervous. I get really stressed out. I hate hot weather. I get scared of this sometimes, show some vulnerability. And there's a human reaction that when someone's vulnerable, we have a little bit of a tendency to move toward them and help them. Try to find the win-wins. They're in there. So when you find the win-win and the optimistic things, that's very appealing, especially now when so many things are negative. So build that optimism and enthusiasm into your strategy. And then also find a good point where you can wrap it up. You're not going to go on and on and talk about every possible thing, because then you're going to end up disagreeing again. So do a few things, get to a good note, and then you can move on, depending on how the situation, how the conversation takes place. So a couple more examples. So storytelling. I go like this. So I'll talking to a voter and I'll be like, yeah, so we're talking about this senator. His name is Senator Daines. And I'll say, I'm a writer. I write for this outfit called, I don't even tell the name because Yale, we're elitist. I'm a writer. I'm a journalist. I like numbers. I say, here's a little self-deprecation. I'm really kind of a nerd. I really like numbers. So I found this interesting data set and I got assigned to write about it. So it was about how much money different companies have given different politicians. And that sounds intriguing, doesn't it? So I'm sort of telling the voter this story. started to look at fossil fuel industry because they actually give a ton of money to politicians. And so I got into this data set trying to figure out where the numbers mean and where they go. So I just thought, okay, look, I'll just start with Montana because I know our senators and I'll figure out, I'll use that to learn about the database. Holy cow, do you know what I found? Our senator, he's the #3 recipient of fossil fuel money. Like, I had no idea. I wouldn't have found that out if not for this assignment. And people are like, what? He's #3? And I'm like, yeah, man, he's gotten all this money from the fossil fuel industry. Here's a meme where he's covered with his sponsors. So yeah, we kind of went on this journey together. I'm like, oh, I'm a data nerd, but I had this assignment, but oh my gosh, I found this thing, right? And so people, it's really interesting. You tell it like a story, and by the time you deliver the punch, people are like, what? No way. Or even the real Republicans are like, interesting. I don't like that, because nobody likes corruption. Nobody likes corporate influence and stuff like that. So this is just one example of a little mini story that definitely helps. Okay, optimism. And I see comments, so I'm going to keep going through because I'm almost done here. Optimism works really great. So yeah, so our senator, yeah, he's bought off by the oil companies. That's not very optimistic. But hey, Montana, we have this amazing wind resource. Everywhere has some kind of good resource that can be used. Even if it's your workforce or your utility or whatever, everyone's got something good we can rally around. Montana, boy, those folks on the West Coast, those West Coast liberals, they want clean energy. But you know what? We could give it to them. We could be an energy leader because there's such a need for this resource that we have. In fact, we could be national leaders and innovators, and we could get rich off of it. Okay, that's all very, very easy to agree with. And, and again, I would tweak these for their priorities, but this is pretty much all upside here. And I'm going to say it with conviction and enthusiasm and not leave room for and that'll come in there, but you can just really carry that optimism through there. Rivalry and sort of sense of place and teamwork really helps too. Okay, so look, the West Coast has this need for wind energy, and they don't really care who they buy it from. They can get it from Montana, we have it, but if not us, they'll get it from Idaho, they'll get it from Canada, they'll get it from the Dakotas. The Dakotas have 20 times the wind jobs that we do, but people hate that. We have our Montana and Dakotas have this rivalry, and Montana feels very superior. But Dakotas, they're kicking our ass, come on. And yeah, so people get kind of riled up. So yeah, so now we're using our team here. So those are some things you can do in your, they will all have to be tweaked for your thing. So where do we agree? Where's our goal? And then we're gonna kind of work together as we shape these solutions. So that's the end of my content. I wanted to scroll back a little bit. Okay, we'll go through a couple of these real quick. So the naysayers, so electric cars are mostly powered by community's electric grid. I'm just going to scroll right, and then that could be from any energy source. Yep. Yes, and yes. So actually, Megan did perfectly. Yeah, and I would say right. So right. So we're yeah, that's a really good point. It's really crazy. We think we've been using gasoline cars for so long. And now we're going to switch. That's a big deal. So the whole where the energy comes from is different than it was. Oil can come from anywhere. Electricity comes pretty local. I think that's kind of cool because now actually we have control over where our energy comes from for our transportation. Costs a lot right now to fill a car. When it's powered by electricity, we get to decide the price. Electricity is determined by your state, not by OPEC. So yeah, I'm glad it comes from our community because we're going to have a better price. So that you made a really good point there about electricity is local. Or local-ish, at least regional. It's not priced globally. Reinmar, yes. Yeah, a lot of that depends. So you want to be careful on how much you're agreeing with someone who's being wrong or offensive. A lot of that is in sort of how you carry it. Remember, right from the very beginning, if someone's being obnoxious, you're not going to have this process at all. You're going to just move on, find someone who's better to talk to. And you can think of the email, the drunk text email about polar bears and all that. You're just going to find the key points that you really can agree with and discard the rest. So that can help. And yes, it is the attitude, right? So you're going to find the little parts that you can agree with within their attitude, within their message, and you're going to harvest along that line. So, and you're not going to respond to the rest, or you're going to set it aside. Hopefully that helps. But now you're going to get practice. Oops. Okay. So in the chat, hopefully Claire can put a little bingo card. It's also in the app that we're sharing files that I suddenly forget the name of. But we're gonna go breakout rooms of 3, and you each get to play one of these roles one time. Good, Claire just put in the bingo card. I'll show you the bingo card in a second. But basically, we're going to go in a group of 3. The role player is going to be this person who you were in the beginning when you're like, who am I going to persuade? You're going to be that person or something like that. And as a role player, you're going to have to kind of come out with these talking points and maybe defend them a little bit. The fabulous advocate, that's just you playing you, but hopefully using some of this and starting your thing by saying, I agree that. And then the observer is watching and using the bingo card and is going to maybe help debrief a little bit. Let's pause and answer Ryan Mark's question. So yeah, there's just nothing we can do about a non-useful conversation though. You know, there's no influence we can have on it. So at that point, it's all about us because we have a lot of energy and insight, and we're really important, and we have to use our energy wisely. So you have to make it more about you than them in that case. Yeah, they can have the victory. It doesn't matter. You can't influence them. Yeah, it's hard. And then sometimes you know, if it's your brother or if it's someone who's sitting next to you on a 5-hour plane flight or something like that, you can try if you want, and you'll probably learn something. But you got to be realistic about what's gonna get you. Okay, so Claire just emailed the bingo or put in the bingo card in the chat. So as the person who's not role playing, the person who's just observing, they're going to use this, and you're just going to help sort of frame some feedback, and you're gonna, just gonna do it 3 times. Take a roll, switch, take a roll, switch, etc. Okay, let's review some of the questions. Yep, exactly. Yeah, right. And if it's scary, then it's definitely not helping anybody, right? And then they're asserting their energy on you, and you need to protect yourself. And so that's exactly what you need to do. And you just need to end it and protect yourself. Yeah, it stinks that that's where we're at, but that is where we're at. Okay, so here's our role player. Let me just see. No, okay. Yeah, so Claire's going to whisk you off. There are going to be some groups of 3, some groups of 4. We're going to come back at 1/4 after. So, and actually, let's make it 10 after to give us a full, maybe we'll shorten the Q&A. So, and Claire will do that. I think some of these you can set a timer. But anyway, we're going to be, no, not 10 after, sorry, 20 after. We're going to regroup at 20 after. So you'll get a breakout room invitation, 3 rounds of role playing, and then we'll come back and share our debriefs. Any last questions before we go? If not, you'll see a little link to your breakout group, and just use it as practice and enjoy. We'll see you in a half hour. Welcome back. No one's bloody. Must not have been too bad. Nice. So go ahead and unmute. We've got 10 minutes to just share how it went, highlights for each group.
I'll just share mine quickly because it's funny.
Go for it. Okay,
I shared with Megan, right? Maggie. In Tennessee, okay. I go to visit my daughter and son-in-law and 4 kids, and they're in a religious community that's ultra right, and it's literal biblical Christian. The thing that's interesting is they're not alone in their, what we can imagine they believe about climate change and science, but they're also surrounded by Amish and a lot of flat earthers. And I have been thinking, I've had some very interesting, serious, nice, congenial, and I just listen because they want to go on about how the celestial veil has holes in the planets, and there's, you know, I'd never met a real person like that. So
right.
I thought that was something that, you know, people made fun of in comedy routines.
And I
just couldn't believe it. And so to me, they're the most extreme example of someone who is not science.
Right.
And that's where I know that I had to just survive by. The only thing I did that was supposed to provoke him to think, he was a honey guy, apiist, middle-aged, really beautiful, loved his plants, loved the honeybees. I said, so you must have a text in your phone. I heard a chime. And he pulled out his cell phone and he goes, well, I don't know. And I said, so yeah, how do those things work? And he said, satellites. I said, right. So how do the satellites fit in this like dome veil thing? That's all I did. I couldn't even, and he explained it. I was like, that's really interesting. So
There's so little
I
doubt
like your
there.
idea of the agreement stuff. It's very useful.
Yeah.
Because
Good.
it's hard to do it, and it does change and put them like a taekwondo move on the same side. So thank you.
Good. Excellent. One good takeaway that's you can practice anywhere.
Okay, let other people talk.
Okay, great. Thanks, Fawn. Okay, who else?
I'll mute my.
Who else wants to give a debrief?
Towards the end of our session, I don't think we were following your rules, Karin, but we were just having our own natural conversation, and ended up having one about windmills, and you know, a couple of us didn't agree, and a couple of us agreed, and so we naturally did the thing, and I just thought that was cool.
It worked.
Yeah.
Well, and what was? Can you debrief the conversation a little bit?
Yeah, and so we were talking about how windmills, how especially when you have so many of them, you know, hundreds of miles of windmills, how it just looks really like dystopian almost. And I'm from the Midwest, and so I'm used to seeing those, and so to me, it's no big deal. While I am for wind energy, I also, you know, made a point that we need to think about the bats and the birds and how we can avoid collisions, because it is a big issue. So kind of agreeing and also saying something that, you know, I had an issue with windmills about. So.
Good job, Megan.
Maggie. I think it's important when we talk about clean energy, you know, some people say it's like a magic bullet, and it's like, it also has some downfalls, and you need to say those too, or else people will cut you off and say, electric cars and coal, and it's like, you know, it's not completely without consequence. So
that's right. That's where you can show a little bit of vulnerability and gain a lot of credibility. Yeah. And the way I pivot that is I say, like, because they're always like, yeah, but birds and wind turbines or, you know, solar panels are hard to recycle, and I go, yeah, man, like, and that bums me out. I love birds. I have bird feeders, whatever. I said, but I don't know there's any, can you think of any kind of energy that has no environmental impact? Like, obviously there isn't one. So like, and as the environment obviously is important to you, if we're talking about birds, then like, I wonder if it makes sense that we just find the one that has the least amount of environmental impact, since they all have some. Like, so then we can look at coal, doesn't kill birds, but then there's that directly anyway, but we have coal ash, right? And so there is no energy that doesn't make it, it doesn't have an impact. And so, and if they're gonna like frame it around birds, then you can kind of make them own that a little bit and be like, oh, I see you're concerned about birds and nature. Yeah, let's use that as our metric and go back and like judge other forms of energy. And so they kind of like, they open that a little bit, and now you can use it.
It's hard not to get sassy, because then my mind's like, oh, do you donate to Audubon on a yearly basis? You know, it's so hard not to get sassy about
extremely it. And yeah, there's places for that amongst your friends or whatever, but
the conversation is so different when you're actually at a work event versus when you're with your friends or your family. So.
Totally. Yep. Right. Yeah, and because you know, when you're in those face-to-face things, you know that the sass won't help you. You can feel that very quickly that it's not going to help you. So yeah, very good.
And I think another touch point could be that it hits people socially as well. For example, electric cars. Electric cars have a very short range. And right now, who has an hour to sit there and wait for your car to charge? You know, people have to go to work, they have jobs. A lot of people drive quite a distance. So I think that that's a point that we could all agree on, that they have advantages and disadvantages in electric cars.
I heard some brilliant, yes, thank you for that. I heard some brilliant frame on electric cars. Someone said, I've only ever had an electric car and I'm just now learning about gasoline cars. Is it true that you can't just refill a gasoline car at night while you sleep? Is it true that a gasoline car doesn't recapture energy in its brakes? Is it true that the price of gasoline is set overseas so you can't control, right? And so think of how that frames it
I'm
differently.
using that for my Toyota Prius. I love it. People ask me about that all the time. I'm going to stop talking, but
yeah. So, right. So if you can plug it in at night, that's way more convenient. So, yeah. So electric vehicles have a ton of advantages, but since they're new, they're the one, they're the ones that seem like the odd man out. But if you flip that, they have an incredible, yeah. Why don't gasoline cars recapture their energy? Gasoline. Is it true that gasoline engine, the internal combustion engine, wastes 80% of its energy? Could that possibly be true? How much, EV wastes only 10%. So, right. So those are things one could learn. I'm writing about that now for Yale. It's really impressive statistics, but it's all a matter of owning the disadvantage, but then also celebrating some of the things that we would all love. So yeah. Cool. Other closing thoughts?
So in our group, I tried to be a climate doomer, and Sherlon also did that. We just tried to not debate anything about climate change, but rather that we're just so pessimistic, why even try? So that's a whole other form of conversation where people kind of flip into this deep despair and just sort of for well, why bother? So that was interesting to have that conversation.
Yeah, and that's when we're not always ready for we're so braced for it to come from the other side of the spectrum, and then you find someone on your opposite side, same skills, but that's pretty easy because you're aligned on lots of things, and then it's just a matter of that's just an attitude thing, pointing out where we're already making progress, and that we can continue to make progress. But I get it. I feel that way too. That's the other thing. I empathize with that. Go back and forth.
Karin, I have a question, and it's more so I'm seeking advice. So when you have a family member who is so extremely difficult, I've had to walk away from my brother, and he's my only sibling, but he's proven to be racist and ignorant as hell. And so I've completely stepped back, and but I'm thinking more so of other different family dynamics, let's say mother-daughter relationships.
Yeah.
I know it's a loaded question, but when do you draw the line of okay, I'm just not going to talk to you, or is it I'm just not going to talk to you about that for my own peace?
I'll certainly start with the latter.
Yeah.
Because you can then still have a relationship and protect yourself. I would keep that one up as long as you can. But the other thing to protect yourself is to make sure that you set firm boundaries. That you say, I'm not gonna, this is not, I'm not gonna do that. And so you defend your space. And if you need to draw a tighter and tighter boundary, then you should definitely do so. And then if that boundary has gotten so tight that you can't have any interactions, then that's really awful, but that would be the last resort. But I think every step of the way, respecting your own energy in your own life. As I've said repeatedly, we are the frontline people here. It's really important to reserve our enthusiasm, our energy, our skills for where they're needed, and not to squander that, and never to let anybody disrespect it. So yeah, keep it, make a boundary, and then see what you have to do to move that fence around and keep it out. I'm so sorry. That comes up in every one of these workshops. I wish I had some sort of helpful answer, but.
Well, I have the answer. It's therapy, but he'll never go, so.
No, but you can, and you can navigate your way through it. You have to defend your own self. Yeah, it's really hard. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Protect yourself. I did put in the link, one of my recent Yale articles that talks about the amazing price. So this is for me, from this is where I build the like inflation, gas prices, woe is me arguments about electric vehicles. Just one example. Man, they are cheap. So there's some things in there, and there's another one. There'll be two more coming out along those lines. Yeah, Carolyn, did you have a?
Yeah. So I think it was yesterday, the New York Times published some data that only 1% of Americans indicated that climate change was the most pressing issue facing Americans, behind more, immediate issues of inflation, et cetera. Yes. So I guess that one of my questions is I'm really interested in sort of that shift of sort of the people who totally agree climate change is happening.
Okay.
But to kind of shift into, oh, it's happening. Now I need to like pay attention to it.
Yep.
And perhaps do something. Like that seems to me to be really harder than you would think. Because what I find is that when I try and bring up climate change in conversation and just get a lot of sort of, yeah, it's bad, topic switch, sort of, yeah, that's a shame, topic switch, or just sort of nothing to work with. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were.
Yeah. So, right. So I get that's not a high priority, climate change in and of itself. But if gas prices are high and a big concern, then you're half a step away from energy policy. So you can take that route instead. Or if we're talking about water or food or global security, all those things are all really related to energy. So you can draw that connection really quickly. And then in so many of the solutions have amazing benefits that are instant and kind of universal. So you can talk about, cheaper EVs. You can talk about local energy, local jobs, relevance, modern, hit the things that everybody likes and that are really advantages. And then that's how you can bring people along. Even if they don't care about climate change, who doesn't want cheaper transportation or more efficient cooling or whatever it is. So yes, we're running out of time. Yes, thank you guys so much. I put my email in there. You can certainly track me down if you have questions. I'm happy to help you brainstorm. If you have situations, family, coworker, brother, anything, let me know. I'm happy we can do a one-on-one or whatever. And thank you guys. This was really fun. I really like the practices. I think it's super helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Go forward and kick ass.
Thank you. Enjoy your vacation.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Bye.